Okay, let's start our webinar today. Today we are going to talk about the center control. Mainly, I'm going to explain um, how to control the center. You can start doing it from the first moves, or you can do it a little later, but some moves should be played in advance to prepare your position for later fight for the center. Okay, before we start this topic, let's cover your homework. So, can you see my screen? Is everything okay? The sound should be good. We have a lot of participants today, which is great. Oh, this is okay. Let's remove it. Uh, so last time we were talking about this game. Yeah, let me check it out. So that was your homework. After d4 and a5 moves. And the question was how to play after this or that move. So e4, d4. Well, many of you here said that bishop c4 should be played. Well, yeah, bishop c4 is definitely a helpful move. But the key idea is to control the e5 square. So f4 was played in order to stop e5. Well, you can do it with bishop c4. So if you like bishop c4, you can play this move first. Rook goes there, for example, queen h3, queen e7, and then you play f4. But the key idea was still to play f4 in this position. Queen e7, and in this position, it's e5, to not let black play this move anyway. So rook b8, now bishop c4. So it's basically the same situation as could happen in case if you play bishop c4 in advance. But this time you already have the pawn on e5. So this bishop stops two pawns. e6 is the object of the attack. King h8 to unpin it. Queen h3 adding some pressure and forcing the enemy pieces to stay passively. Well, of course, we don't want to lose this pawn. That's why b3 as a prophylaxis. Well, they could capture it earlier, for example, here, but I don't think it is promising. So at least bishop e6, and then you have two strong pawns, which will definitely either open the enemy king's position or get to the seventh rank and will tie enemy pieces down to it. So knight f8 was played and b3 because we don't want to lose a pawn. Now a5 is played, and that was my second question for you. The second question here was how to take advantage of this a5 move, how to continue with this plan. Any suggestions? Okay, thanks for Alfredo. Alfredo suggests a4. John suggests f5. Who else? Rook c1 and push the pawns. Well, a4 I think is not required. Well, at the what a4 can be played by black. They take, you take with the pawn. What is their maximum? Their maximum is just bringing the rook to a2, attacking g2, but g2 is protected. Instead of that, you shouldn't spend tempi on that preparation. Well, of course, a4 cements the position and you can play it, but then you have to realize your main plan. Rook c1 and push the pawns. Well, okay, so you are trying to do some preparation, some prophylaxis. What can I suggest? If you think that a certain maneuver or a certain idea works without prophylaxis, do it immediately without any prophylaxis, because you may let your opponent prepare or initiate a counterplay. In such a case, your original idea won't be so dangerous for him. So if you want to play a 5 right away. Moreover, maybe your rook comes to the f1 square. It's not required only one. Well, you're going to play this move, which opens the king, so they have to take. Also, they would love to get rid of this e6 weakness, but then you develop initiative. So here you actually converted uh, one type of advantage to another type of advantage. Here they have a weak pawn on e6 that they have to defend. You allow him to exchange. No, and that was your advantage. You allow him to exchange this weak pawn, but convert your advantage of having the weak pawn in the enemy camp to your initiative with two rooks and attack of the king, and making the e pawn as a passed pawn. So knight h7, doubling the rooks. Queen d8, to not let the rook to go to f7. Queen g3, adding pressure here. Rook e7, h4. The knight is almost trapped here. Not trapped, but locked. Rook b7 and e6. So they cannot take, and you use this square. Well, the knight can go there, but it's just a sacrifice of the exchange, and it's a winning position. Well, let me show you. So take on f6, g takes f6, rook takes f6. How to defend rook h7? It's a terrible move. Well, maybe queen e5 is enough. Well, I don't think we should talk about this position. It's completely winning. King g8 e7, another discovery check. The queen is lost. And if not this move, then how to play to get rid of this pin? This, it still doesn't work. Here you can continue with e7. And if the rook takes, it is a checkmate. If the queen takes, you can use the back rank. Queen b8, rook g8 is not a possibility. Blocking with the queen is a blunder too. So queen e8, rook f8, and you're winning. So knight cannot go to f6. They played this move, queen e5, increasing the pressure, queen e8, and now a4. But a4 was actually not played to stop this, but to play this, to attack the queen. Queen d8, rook f2, some preparation. Oh, this is where Fischer didn't know how exactly he wins. His position was obviously winning, but he was in a time trouble already because it comes to the 40 moves limit. It's move 35. And you know, when they played, there was I think there were 2 hours given for 40 moves, and there was an increment of 1 hour. No, not increment. It was extra time once they pass 40 move time control. 1 hour more was given to each player in such a case. And after that, after 20 moves more, they had 30 minutes as extra time again. So finally, the game could last for 7 hours. This is where he was just playing the moves to pass the 40 moves time control. Queen e4, preparing with some attack, but well, right now nothing works, so he wants to play rook f7 actually. Attacking here because once the knight moves, it can be captured with a rook on f6 or f8, and then queen h7 is a checkmate. So black plays knight f6, and it was taken. G takes, it seems that this rook protects, but the other rook comes to f6, h6 folds, so it's completely winning. Bishop c4 back, king h8, and after queen f4, there is no defense. Well, rook h7, probably defending this. It's simply rook f8. King g7, queen h6 directly. That was over. So what I want you to remember from this example, well, that was your homework here, f4. f4 to stop e5, to fix this weakness on e6, and then play bishop c6, block it, and then play bishop c4 to pin the pawn, then block it with e5. And once you get all your pieces prepared, play f5 to convert your advantage to another form of advantage, which can be better at this exact position. So here, because the king is weak, initiative is likely to be converted to an absolutely winning position rather than a pass pawn. Okay, so we are done with this topic. Let's continue. So we are going to talk about the center control. I have several videos. Um, for example, there was a webinar I conducted. It was called "The Role of the Center While Attacking." Another video is how to control the middle and when to control how and when to control the middle. This illustrates what opportunities a player gets when he dominates in the center. Now I would like to talk about situations where one of the players doesn't fight for the center from the first move, the other does, and what may it lead to. Well, I can definitely declare here that it's in modern chess, it's not obligatory to dominate in the center starting from the first moves. You can do it as move 3, 4, 5, but at least one pawn should control the center. Let me show you. So, for example, this is a Scotch game actually. Knight c6, d4, it takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6. So who controls the center? Obviously white with a pawn. Knight c3, bishop b4, creating a pin and adding pressure to the center. So chess players here, everyone plays knight takes c6, b takes c6, bishop d3. And now black controls the center with d5. So, well, how to play? Well, you can play bishop d2, but then you may lose a pawn on e4, which is a bit unpleasant. So, for example, bishop d2, castle, castle, then bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3, d takes e4. Well, maybe you want to take, but then it's approximately equal position. Absolutely equal, with no chances to play for a win, uh, only for hope that your opponent blunders. So chess players take there, c takes d5, and now we have a situation where black didn't fight for the center from the first moves, but finally obtained the center. So it's completely fine, but you have to get one of the pawns to the 6th rank at least to fight for the center in future. If you just develop pieces, you will be in the trouble. Well, how do people play in this position? Bishop g5 is the main move, queen f3 is the second move. So queen f3, for example, c6. Well, this move, they play h6 to stop the bishop coming to g5, bishop f4. What is going on in this position? Black has the center control, obviously, and white tries to undermine the center. This is what their play is based on. They may try to initiate a kingside attack, but mainly they move this knight away and try to undermine the center with c4. Another thing that I want you to learn, once you gave up the center control and let your opponent have pawns in the center, undermine these pawns with your pawns. This is the main plan. For example, it's very common for queen's gambits, for almost all queen's gambit lines. Let me show you. Oh, well, let's finish with this one and let me show you. For example, if you choose bishop g5 plan, attacking this because you want to take, and if they double, then you have attack on the king. If they take with the queen, you take on d5. So c6, and again, the situation reversed. Now you are, well, white no longer has the center control. This pin doesn't make sense, and doubling the pawns doesn't cost a bishop. So that's why bishop goes back. And in this position, well, something like that, maybe rook d1, knight e2, and c4, trying to undermine. There are a lot of plans, but again, black has the center, white has better pieces coordination, and these two factors eliminate each other. That's why the position is equal. Okay, now I wanted to show you uh, Queen's Gambit. So knight bd7, let's say rook c1, a6, for example. It's not the main move, but it's one of the common ideas. So a3, d takes c4, black gives up the center control, bishop takes, b5, bishop goes back, and then not bishop b7, not anything else but c5 right away. c5 right away, and then what happens? So there is a pawn in the center of this. These are about to be exchanged. If d takes c5, it's fine for black because they improve their pieces. There is a check on d3. Well, bishop comes to b7. There is a control over e4, and I would say that the black pieces are located better with equal situation in the center. And if they don't take, then c takes d4, e takes d4, and the pawn in the center exists, but it's an isolated pawn. So black stops any d pawn movements further and can blockade it with their pieces. So that's why it's quite promising for black. Okay, let's go back. Now, the second example. Sicilians. Knight c6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, knight f6. Knight c3, and d6. So this is where only on the move fifth, black tries to control the central squares. Actually, they try to do it with the first move. c5 also affects the center. Okay, try to answer a question. Why Sicilian lines exist? Why fighting for the center with slow moves like d6 or e6 is still possible and provide black with good chances to play for a win? What do you think? So John thinks that it's a better structure for pawn in games. Well, I partially agree with it. Okay. Well, it depends on the end game. For example, can Sicilian end games are better for white because there is a weakness on d6. So very often such thing happens, and the queen from c7 has to be exchanged, and these end games are better for white. But for example, dragon end game is favorable for black. So there is no certain answer about the endgames, but in some, black prefer to exchange the queens, and some not. Well, in Dragon, yes, moving the queens away provides provides black with some advantage. Okay, so the answer of Michael: white's pieces become more vulnerable as black develops in castles. Well, what can I say? No, it's not fully correct. The key idea of Sicilians is that you have more pawns in the center, and this is the key factor. This d6 pawn provides you with well, with the central control too. White at the first glance have more space, but uh, having more space means that you have to defend this space. You have to control squares. You shouldn't let the black pieces to invade your camp using the squares that you control originally. And in these Sicilian positions, you with black you control the center. You do not let your opponent to progress, and you also get some ways to maneuver with your pieces into the enemy territory. It's hard for white to defend it, and mainly it's because you have more pawns in the center. Okay, so g3 was played, e6, bishop g2, bishop e7, castle, queen c7, bishop e3, and castle. So this is a playable position with strong strategic fight. I play a6 here. Typically, I don't like these ideas, but right now it's not a big problem. Queen b8 and a6 can be played later. So black is fine. If you wanna ask the engine thinks white is better, plus 0.5, but the engine usually says white is better in open Sicilians, but how to convert it? Okay, actually for the homework, you have this position where your task is to answer what's wrong with knight c6 move, why c takes d4 is a must, why black shouldn't let white dominate with pawns in the center, how you punish d5. And this is your other homework. So we sacrifice the pawn on g5, but we have two pawns there. How does black have a compensation? This is your other homework task. I'm going to send a PDF. Well, actually, I can send it right away. So this is your task. Let's continue with our topic today. Okay, so this is an example when white slowly fights for the center, but then gets the control over it and wins the game. So Paul Keres was playing with black pieces. It was a very strong grandmaster, but still lost. So knight f3, ready opening, d5. I would play d5 myself, fighting for the center. e3, knight f6, c4, starting undermining, c6. This slow strategy with not pushing the pawn to d4 or e4 is very tricky because it provides white with a flexibility. They are not sure which they pawn structure they like, and that's why they first would love to see how black sets his pieces to choose a better pawn structure that can be the most unpleasant for black. So you see, people who try to deviate with Larsen opening, with Reti, or playing c4 in the first move, want to keep flexibility and choose the pawn structure that they want according to what black plays. Okay, let's continue. So b3, bishop b2, they are not playing d4, but d4 would lead to one of the lines of Slav defense. b3, g6. Oh, well, black needs to develop their pieces. They don't want to play this to block the bishop. I would, for example, play bishop f5 here, then e6. But g6, bishop g7, and the knight goes to d7. What do you think? Which move you'd better play in this position? Okay, now while you are answering this question, I'll try to answer the question of Peter about the pawns in the center. So this is Sicilian. White has more central pawns, not more pawns in the center, but more central pawns. E4, I mean, the E6 and D6 are central pawns, and E4 is a central pawn too. So with the pawns, black control more squares, which prevents white's maneuvering here. And because of that, we can say that.
But the F pawn and the C pawn, I mean, no, they don't control two squares in the center, but they're not as good.
You mean F4 can be played often, right? So
Or C.
Well, C, yes, but C makes the d4 weak. Anyway, yes, it's also possible. Yes, they control e5, but at the same time, they cannot use none of these squares to move their knights, for example. So yes, f4 slightly controls e5, and it is important. You cannot go that way, but you can enter the enemy territory through the other way. So that's why more central squares is usually preferred. That's why when you are, well, like when kids learn chess, chess coaches usually ask them to capture with their pawns closer to the center. For example, like I don't know which example. Okay, let's say this knight f3, knight f6, this. So I don't know, bishop f5, and if this happens, they take through this closer to the center to get the more pawns in the center, which is actually not the best way. It's a possible move, but it's not the best way. Instead, very often it's better to capture with the pawn out of the center, but get a quick development. So chess is a game of chess is always a game of compromises. You have to compare what is better for you, having more pawns in the center or have another benefit. For example, here a quick benefit. Also, a similar situation occurs in a Russian game. This is the line that I play. Knight c3, so they take. D takes. Why d takes? Well, it seems that it's better to take with the b than fight for the center with d4. At least it's logical. But this time, not having the center is completely fine because these squares are available for pieces maneuvering. For example, this bishop e3, quick development. The king is castled and a strong kingside attack. In such positions, it's also possible for black to castle queenside like that. But then again, we use the center to maneuver with our pieces. This, double attack. Well, if they don't take, but I don't know, move this, at least we can take on a6 and get a bishop pair. If they save the bishop somehow, then bishop b5 is dangerous. Okay. So a lot depends on how pieces are located. But usually having more pawns in the center with other equal conditions is preferable. So let's continue. Well, what would you play in this position? Knight bd7 was the last move. Okay, guys, you are absolutely right. Take on d5. Yeah, c takes d5. Why? Why c takes d5 is a good idea? Well, if they take with the pawn, then what does this knight do? It should be on c6. Well, Keres, of course, understood it, and that's why he took with the knight. But weakening the king's position was also a mistake. Now it's time to fight for the center, otherwise they play d4, e5. So d4. No, black pieces are not well prepared. Now e4 is also coming, and that's why they play this move, knight bd2. Well, actually, in this position, knight c3 would deserve attention. Why? To swap a few pieces off and try to, well, bishop f5 is not playable because of f4, and try to prevent these central movements. How? Well, good question. I don't know, because bishop g4, it's still e4. Maybe instead there should be some counterplay on this side, like a4. because a5, knight d5. Anyway, this position is still favorable for white. So bishop f5, queen c1. a5 finally was played. a3, because knight before it can be a problem. With bishop f5, black stops e4. Knight b6, queen b2. So some potential threats here. That's why king g8. Rook ac1, taking the c5 square under control. Maybe the rook will move there. Ideally, we would love to get one of our knights to c5 to attack a lot of squares into the enemy camp and prevent the queen and bishop maneuvering. Knight c8, knight e5, knight d7 to exchange the knight. So what would you do this time? White probably has more space, but how to use this space? How to use this better center control? Yes, guys, thank you. I think you are right about f4. Not sure if bishop c4 should be played then, or bishop f3, but definitely f4 and some kingside attack with g4. I think they're gonna take on e5 then. So f4, knight takes e5, f takes e5, and then e4, not g4. Just don't blunder this pawn. It's protected now, but do not forget about it. Maybe you need to place the rook here. Okay, f4. Well, I missed one of your questions there. Here, what if instead of this move we do that? Good point, but this time after e6, if we decide to capture, they take with the e pawn. This is how they have fewer pawns in the center. I mean, black has fewer pawns in the center, but controls the most important e4 square, so they can do that move. Well, you can do the same with a knight, but I don't see the purpose of doing it. So let's say knight d7. How you defend it? With f4? Well, the pawn structure looks ugly, and they can simply control a lot of squares here to prevent your activity. Even if they just continue with f6, it is fine. So that's why if you want to take on d5, you should take it right away when the pawn is still on e7. So this f4. Well, they didn't take, they played this move. Bishop f3. No, b5 is stopped. You also control the e4 square and you're about to push the pawn forward. f6, the knight has to retreat. We can swap the knights off, and it's not a mistake, but white has space. And if white has space, it means that black doesn't have space. And with no space, it's quite difficult to maneuver with pieces effectively. That's why it's better to have more pieces on the board. So this knight on d7 doesn't have better squares. It can go to b6 only, and that's why this move. So if they want to exchange this knight, we are completely fine. We can even capture with the pawn. Why with the pawn? Well, to open the file, attack b7, and also get the pawn closer to the center. It will help us to continue with e4 and d5, and maybe create some passed pawns in the center. So bishop e6, e4 anyway, knight b6. Some prophylaxis to not blunder with a check in case if the queen moves. And this is where black tries to fight for the center with f5. So knight e5 was obviously the best move. Knight goes there, for example. They may take, knight takes. So, no, actually. Yeah, actually knight e5 was possible, but maybe white played better in the game. So there is some attack, but at the same time, there is this square available, and also bishop f5 can be played. So it looks quite promising for black now. Yeah, 95 doesn't look good. Okay, so here f5 and the game continued with d5. Why? It was actually a mistake. Instead of this move, maybe still knight e5 or knight takes d6 was a better option. But black is doing right things. They're trying to undermine the center. If they don't do this, then it's either f5 will be played later, or knight d6 maybe, and then d5. Yeah, knight d6 and then d5. Like knight takes d6, then pawn takes and d5. We sacrifice the pawn, but then we can use our rook to pressure d6. Okay, let me play a random move. Then knight a5. Okay, let me play something else. Maybe this move. Then d5. C takes, E takes, knight takes, rook fd1. With some pressure, with some ideas like knight b6, knight e4, knight c5 also. So we can sacrifice the pawn and convert our um, central domination to another type of the advantage. In our case, it's initiative, rook versus queen confrontation. The queen can hardly find a good spot. So queen e8, for example, knight e4, threatening with this move. Then b7 is hanging. This is also a target. Fine. So f5 is required. That was absolutely right from black. White played g5. They had a concrete idea. Uh, what do you think is the best move for black now? F takes e4. So this is what suggested John. Anybody else? Okay, thanks. Paul also considers f takes e4. So why not c takes d5? Let me explain you. So actually, yes, if it's f takes e4, and this is what was played in the game. As for c takes d5, well, e takes d5, and then what? If the bishop takes, it's knight b6, and the bishop is not protected. In case of bishop f3, it's knight e8 with extra material. In case of knight takes d5, it's queen e5, which is a double attack. So knight c7, yes, it's possible to move the knight and at the same time defend d6, but knight b6. And now after the rook moves, it's a annihilation of defense. Rook takes c7, queen takes c7, queen e6. F takes e4, d takes e6. This is what was played in the game. E takes f3, knight takes f3. So I don't know why, but it was obviously this was the best move. I don't know why Keres didn't play it. Maybe he thought that there is a certain trap, but I don't know which. So, for example, knight g5, the rooks can be just exchanged. Maybe the attack doesn't look so strong. Let me play it. So knight g5, rook f1, rook f1, knight bc4, pawn takes c4, and knight f5. So it seems that black was able to cement their position with this move and then maybe consider the exchange of the queens. So I don't know what Paul Keres missed here, but he didn't play this move. Instead, he tried to attack this pawn. That was obviously a mistake. Now he is in the trouble. Knight goes there. If he decides to take, how would you continue? Okay, while you are thinking, let me tell you something. Here, you may think, well, where is White's advantage? They no longer have any pawns in the center, and Black has the pawn on e7. Well, that's right, guys. But this time, the center, I mean, the pawn center is not important at all because of other factors becoming more decisive. Which are the factors I'm talking about? Well, the king weakness. The king weakness and the ability of white to attack it through this diagonal with knights as well, and maybe even with a pawn push to get the king exposed. And there is still some center control with the f pawn. So e5 square is available and becomes like a strong point for the knights. Yeah, here you have to play knight d4, the rook moves there, and knight g4 to go to h6. So knight e6, knight h6 is a checkmate. For example, this, queen moves, and knight h6, the game is over. That's why taking on e6 is not a possibility. Queen f8, queen d4, rook a6. So, well, this move is possible, but then knight d7 fork. That's why they have. Um, yeah, knight g5 was a good move too, but knight d4 seems to be a better option. Maybe there is no big difference actually. So rook goes there, and look at these pieces. They are totally miscoordinated. The knight is covering a certain square, which is important for the position, but this rook is not participating. Just opening the position on the in the center, or the E or the F files would work for white because the interaction of the black pieces is lost. How would you continue in this position in order to get it more open? Okay, thanks, John. I'm waiting for more suggestions, and then I will announce what you suggest. Nobody else? Okay. So it's knight d7. John is absolutely correct. This move offers an exchange and the position becomes more open. Moreover, this pawn, which may be considered as a weakness by the first glance, but it can be supported, distracts enemy pieces. So knight f7 covering this square. Rook cd1 supporting and threatening with d8. Rook d6. Queen c4, so it's not the end. These rooks can be exchanged and the pawn still exists. Rook e8, trying to cover the d8 square, and the rook on a6 is doing nothing, but knight g5. Well, another possibility here could be to exchange, then play queen e6, and then knight g5 with f5, getting the other rook to back to the game. But knight g5 right away. b5 chasing the queen, but queen e4. Well, this doesn't make much sense. c6 is hanging, d8 is coming after that. Maybe queen c6, queen d5, and d8. So e6 was played. Rook d6, queen d6. Well, this move is a mistake because the queen takes there, and then it's hard to find a good move. Blocking doesn't work so well, at least because of queen c6. So doing king h8, or well, king h8 is a blunder. There is a fork. King g7 should be a blunder too. Maybe it's not, okay. then I want to just play this move and get the pawn promoted sooner or later. Once it moves, I can take on c6, play knight e6, and promote the pawn. So this is, for example, a blunder. How is it a blunder? Queen e7. Knight goes there, then knight checks. If they play something else, like move the king, then I can promote. Or just take on h7, depends on where they move the king. Okay, fine. So rook d6, queen d6, queen e6. And the endgame becomes completely winning. Knight d8. It seems that it's not the end, but knight c5 defending and vacating the line for the rook. Knight goes there, back, rook e1, king f8. It seems that the king is able to control e8, but no, knight e6. And if he goes there, it's a discovered attack. He loses a rook. If he goes back, then it's still this move. So this rook d8 means that we can check, forcing him to go to g7 and then initiate a fork. If rook a7, how would you play in this position? Rook e8 and knight e6. Let's see. Rook e8, king g7, knight e6, king f6. d8 equals queen. Knight takes, knight takes. Yes, it's a winning position. I agree. But instead it was rook e7 here. Why? Well, if this time they take, it's simply d8. The knight is pinned. And we are always, if the king goes somewhere, we are always ready to take and promote. So the key idea was to chase the king away to, the king to the g7 and then pin the knight to capture with the check and promote. And rook e8 is not a possibility. And rook b7 is too slow because this is a check and then the pawn is promoted. Actually, it can be promoted right away. Okay, so this is how Alexander Konstantinopolsky was able to fight the center. So he played b3, but later exchanged and played d4, fighting for the center. And then he was able to play e4 even with his pieces. So you see that he adapted his strategy to what Black played. Black played a small inaccuracy, knight b d7. Then he took and totally converted the situation to his favor. He played d4 and well, swapped the bishop away, weakened the king, and took advantage of it. Of course, there were a few mistakes, and because of them, Black was able to equalize the position in case, for example, of rook takes f4. It's earlier. So here, rook f4 was a possibility, but Keres was afraid to play this move because he thought there is a strong initiative for white. But no, he was able to restrict the white activity. Okay, the next example where Black fights for the center, but slowly. Knight f3, b6. Well, does anybody know about this Sicilian line b6? It doesn't deserve attention, actually. Such an opening exists and called Catalimov Sicilian or Sicilian Defense Catalimov variation, named after famous international master Boris Catalimov. Unfortunately, he is already dead. But in 2001, in 2001, I was playing against him. I was playing with white pieces. I played d4, so he didn't have a chance to play Catalimov Sicilian against me. So well, this is actually either unsound or semi-sound opening. Okay, Anthony, I will mute you if you don't mind because there is a background noise. Okay, so can you get the access to these games? Mm, well, I think you should get them annotated, but they are annotated in Russian, in my native language. But I think I can translate it and send it to you. So I'll try. I'll try to do it once I finish the recording for Chessable course. So maybe in the middle of the week. I'll publish it um, in Chessland's group on chess.com. So b6 definitely is not the best way, but they finally transpose to the hedgehog, to the position that I play when I play Sicilian. So with a slightly weird move order, oh, well, bishop d8, bishop comes to c7. So here in one of my games with white pieces, I played queen f2. I was playing against Grandmaster Diego Flores here in Argentina 1 year ago. And well, he had some very slight advantage, but then I managed to outplay him, but couldn't realize my advantage, and the game ended in a draw. Well, but this time it was bishop g1. Bishop g1 and d5. So look at this position once again. What did happen? Black is very passive by the first glance, but at the same time ready for any actions that white takes here. You may look at the engine, and the engine says white is better plus 0.6, which is actually an opening advantage. But if you look at the statistics, a lot of games here end in the black favor. For example, in this exact position, there are 16 games played among masters, and 38% are winning for black. 44 are draws, and only in 19% of all cases, white wins. So this is not the best strategy. Well, my move queen f2 is actually not a good move at all. Here the statistics shows that there were 3 games, and one lost for white, 2 others were draws. It doesn't include my game against Grandmaster Diego Flores, but it means that 3 draws and 1 win for black. So even with almost no control over the center, I mean, with a little control over the center like this, it is possible to play passive positions because of better pieces coordination and the better preparation for opening the center here. So bishop g1 was played. What would you play for black? Their pieces are already prepared, but what for? There should be like a resulting strike for black, which illustrates that the black pieces are better coordinated. What strike I'm talking about? Who can guess? So, by the way, guys, could you please raise your hands, those who play the hedgehog with black pieces? Well, it can appear from different openings, but mainly either from Nimza Indian or Sicilian lines. Does anybody have it in his primary repertoire? Oh, Michael, you should play this opening because you have Sicilian, and for example, the Hedgehog is one of the best weapons against Marek Zibine. Okay, nobody plays it. Fine. Guys, you should try because it teaches you how to play with a lack of space. Well, I play Marek Bind as white too, but not against every Sicilian. Fine. So d5, yes, it's obviously d5. Why? Well, it opens everything. It opens the bishop, which can go to f4 and h2. It allows us to push the second pawn to the center if white plays slowly. It attacks c4, it attacks e4, and it opens this bishop. So very often, even with queen a8, we put pressure on f3. So c takes, bishop f4. They have to block. Bishop h2 is interesting, but then it seems that we have a weakness on the e6, and that pawn on h2 wasn't so important. If somehow black could quickly change the order, the queen first and the bishop behind, it would work. But with the bishop first and the queen behind, it's not risky at all. So bishop a3, and e takes d5, taking advantage of the pin. Knight f5, d takes e4. Well, knight d6 looks attractive, but doesn't work. Take, and knight g4 is coming. For example, knight e8, it's knight g4. Double attack. Well, queen g1 is a defensive move, but then f2. So the queen is trapped. Queen g5, threatening the mate. Now it's time for g6. The knight is not hanging because of the pin, but anyway. F takes e4. F takes e4, queen e5, getting the queen to the place of action. So it's a pin, and if the knight moves away, not without a check, not with a check, then the queen is lost. So knight h6 with a check is a must. King f8, queen d2. So it seems okay. White has a pawn in the center, but look at their pieces and try to compare it to these pieces. So this rook is active, this rook is active, the knights are protecting each other, and the bishop is targeting e4. The only disadvantage is that this knight can be under the attack once we capture on e4 with a knight. This is the only problem. But now look at the white pieces, how they are discoordinated. The knight on the edge is not doing much. This knight defense. This bishop is actually not doing anything. It would be better to have this bishop somewhere on a2 targeting f7. At least this is how this bishop would be coordinated with the knight on h6. Okay, John, don't worry, but remember that the link is always the same. You can use the one from the previous webinar. The link is the same. I from time to time change it because of security reason, but I didn't change it for a few months. Oh, well, I'm not sure if you remember, but there was a situation when some hackers from South America joined, and we demonstrated some inappropriate videos. So that's why I decided to not publish the link everywhere, so only people who register get it. But if you registered for the previous webinar, you can use that link. Okay, so those of you who struggle with YouTube, uh, you can join Zoom because Zoom is working perfectly well. So if you, okay, message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com and I'll send you the link if you didn't register, for example. Okay, there is a good question by Michael, whether this rook on e8 would better stay on d8. Well, occasionally, yes. If the rook was on d8 already, then yes, it would be better. But generally, but mainly because of the confrontation of the rook versus queen. Um, if we expect the queen to move immediately, then there is no point of allocating the rook on the d file. Maybe if you plan to move the knight with a temper and somehow exchange and take advantage of this pin. So this position is better, but if you play this, they move the queen. So spending the tempo on rook d8 probably doesn't deserve attention here. So king g7, bishop e2. Now this is coming. So this is a very obvious idea. So if the queen is chased away, there is also a knight hanging. This is what black plays. Their pieces are coordinated for a tactical strike. Now, if queen c3, it's simply king takes h6. So queen takes queen, then knight takes, and the rook c7 doesn't win anything. Well, the pawn is hanging on a6 because the bishop moved, but it's already two minor pieces for a rook, and all these pieces are centralized. So rook takes c3, allowing knight e4. Well, this is under attack, but does it make sense to capture it? Let's decide. For example, in case of queen d7, threatening with queen f7 maybe, how would you play? Rook e7. Well, probably you chose the simplest way. Before playing rook e7, I would calculate such lines like knight g3, knight f2, and knight c3. It seems like knight c3 is the best one. Because if they take on f7, what do they achieve? The king is relatively safe. No checks can be delivered. And moving the rook there, by the way, Zoom just recently asked me if I speak English. So is my English so bad? So it recognized it as other language. Okay, so rook d7 was played, and I mean, it wasn't, it's just one of the lines. And in case if they threaten here, I'm sure we have a counterplay with bishop here. How does it work? So if the king doesn't take, then with queen e3, we force him to take. So let's say he takes right away, then this move. And then we join the rook to the attack. So if king h3 or g3, we bring the rook, there should be checkmate. In case of king g1, we can still bring the rook to the game with this maneuver. Now, moving the f to the f file means losing the queen. Moving to somewhere else means that we can continue the attack with rook e3. So king goes there. Well, queen e2, and at the very least, if he goes there, we exchange the queens. If he goes there, then we play queen g4. So this leads to a checkmate, and this leads to a queen loss. So black is completely winning. This attack on h7 cannot be converted because black is much faster. Knight g4 was played here. Well, it's hard to suggest a good move. Knight g4, queen c3. And because these So these two are hanging. So for example, this move leads to rook e2, threatening with a checkmate, and white is a piece down in such a case. So the bishop cannot be captured. Also, g2 is vulnerable. Queen h6. Well, they could take on d7 actually, why not? But just bishop c6, cementing the position. We are a pawn up, and we also have h5, knight f2 idea. Queen h6, king g8, queen f4. This is what happened in the game. White is only pawn down, but this piece's coordination becomes decisive. So just knight df6, any attack on f7 are not possible, and rook cannot invade the enemy camp. But this queen is annoying. So knight h6, king g7. They played bishop f1. Not sure what for, probably to defend g2. And after queen e5, they simply resigned. Why? Because after the exchange of the queens, the knight is trapped. And if the queens are not exchanged, let's say it's this move, then queen h5 is a double attack. That's it. So you see, black is passive, but better pieces coordination and these two pawns which prevent white from invading our camp right away through the center. Let's say if this pawn was on e5, then knight d5 would be playable and the position would favor white, and maybe knight f5 too. But with two pawns being flexible, we have some control over the center and we are prepared for opening the position once we improve our pieces a little, like this, and this. Fine. Okay, so we are done with the main stage of the main part of our webinar. Let me try to explain. First of all, the fight for the center is crucial and it should start from the first move. However, if one of the players is able to occupy the center with pawns, the other one should undermine the center by offering a pawn trade, or there should be some pressure with his pieces. Like, for example, it is in Sicilians when black has two pawns in the center or two central pawns, and white has active pieces that can pressure the black's position. So you know Sicilian can be played for both colors, and both players have winning chances. Um, if your opponent has the center and the space, it's fine. You can still finish your development using very small space, like I demonstrated here in this game when black played the Hedgehog. Um, this is how you choose a defensive side, but at the same time you keep your pieces flexible to any active actions of your opponent. However, if one of the players catches or grabs the space and at the same time he keeps his pawn structure solid, this is what happened in the next game that I'm not going to show right away, but we will talk about it later. So if one of the players grabs the space and at the same time keeps his pawn structure solid, he is likely to obtain advantage and force the opponent to play for a draw only. Because, well, nowadays strong players are able to realize space advantage. And if you, for example, were following matches between Alpha Zero and other engines, Alpha Zero mainly fights for the space and then somehow realizes this advantage. It's hard for a human player, but strong grandmasters nowadays are quite successful with it. Anyway, there are two ways of playing chess. You can fight for the center with like classics did, with the pawns moving to the fourth or fifth rank right away, or you can play flexibly with one of the pawns to e6 d6 or e3 d3, and then fight for the center a little later. But you should dominate in the center anyway. I mean, not you should, but you should have some center control anyway. Okay, so look at this fragment. c4, e5, knight f3, knight d7, and e4. White fights for the center. g6. Bishop g5. f6 was played. A kind of inaccuracy, but it's not a developing move. It was better to bring the knight to f6. But f6. Bishop h4, bishop g7, c5. What's the idea of c5? Well, to take on e5, obviously, and make the black pawn structure really bad. So d takes c5 was played, and this is what I want you to play against me right away. I can share this position. You're going to play it with white pieces. It's in the chat, so everyone can see it. Now what? So everyone who likes my webinars and who wants to support it, please use this link. This is how you can send a donation using PayPal. It works simply. You click donate button, enter the amount you want to donate, then click PayPal, and it redirects you to your PayPal account, enter it, and then the money will be sent to my account right away. So I appreciate donation. It helps me to prepare better for the webinars and as well as to plan content. Fine, so the link is sent. What we are going to do now? We are going to play. We are going to play on chess.com. So I'm entering the live section. We are going to start from this position. The one that I sent, you will be playing with white pieces. I will be playing with black. So custom position odds. What do you need is just to tell me your usernames. So everyone who wants to play, tell me your username. So I'm playing black. Well, I promise white is much better, so you have good chances to play for a win. Okay, thanks, John. The challenge is sent to you. Mhm. So let's make a few moves on the board and then I'll challenge someone else. So I also would love to change settings. Classic, brown. Okay, maybe later. Yeah, well, I think the first move is obvious because the idea of c5 was to distract the d6 pawn, after which you can successfully capture on e5. That's right. Then I cannot capture back because this is how I lose a piece. You can then take on e5. So I have to play queen e7. Now I'm in a trouble, but it's not a completely lost position. White is much better. Okay, so John, please make the move within 15 seconds because, okay, thank you. Okay, then I have to play c6 maybe. Parallax, the challenge was sent, so please accept it. So same situation, I have to play this. Now I'm attacking b2. c6 has to be played to control these two squares. Knight c3, okay. Let's just develop pieces, knight e7. Okay, a new game. Okay. Ah, your challenge doesn't match the member's current match settings. Okay, so I don't know what's going on. Please adjust your settings. Okay, so I'm going to take only 5 here. I actually think, okay, well, 95 anyway. Am I missing anything? Seems not. Okay, castle. Then I can castle myself, or I can play bishop e6. Let me try bishop e6. f4. Okay, fine. f4 it seems to be a good move, but then queen d4. Check, bishop f2, queen retreats back to d6, right? Yeah, I think so. Or maybe to b4. No, let's do d6. I just shouldn't blunder any discovery checks. Actually, I may blunder them. Okay, we'll see. Oh, queen b3. It's a good move. I absolutely agree with you. However, I think bishop f7 doesn't provide you with much advantage, so I just play b5. Okay, let me try a challenge against Kanga one more time. No. Queen e2. So you didn't play e5, which I think you should do. Then castle, knight b5, take on b5. So what's the purpose? Bishop takes, okay. King f8. Yeah, blocking with the bishop on d7 isn't a good idea. So the king is too vulnerable then. And now if I play this move, I keep extra piece. I don't actually believe that b5 was a good move. I mean, knight b5 was a good move. Okay, rook d1, logical. Now there is a discovered attack. I want to take on f4, so it's so attractive. Okay, let me take. Queen g3. Okay, fine. Then I have to play well, bishop e6 move. Maybe. Let's talk about it. So queen e6 is my candidate move. Queen e6, then bishop c4 probably back. Then I play queen b6, offering another queen trade, and that looks okay. But I can also play bishop e6, and in case of bishop e5, I take on b3, and I don't see a tempo gaining move with this bishop on e5. So bishop d6, I can save my bishop. I think this is much safer. Queen c5. Okay, queen c7 is a must, protecting the knight. I was actually expecting bishop g3. In my opinion, it was more dangerous because then the queen has to go to g5, which is not a good square for the bishop. It's the object of the attack there. Queen b6. Once I solve the problem with my king, I'll be winning, but it's not an easy task, of course. Bishop c4. Okay, nice. Let's take. Now bishop e6. So rook f7. I don't really want to get pinned, but I want to get rid of this pin because I expect white to take advantage of this pin, but not this. I mean, not the pin on f7. Rook d1. So this, how strong this threat is. Well, I don't think it's a threat. King f7. Yeah, king f7 seems like a reasonable move. Yeah. e5. Okay, okay. So e5. What if queen takes e5? Then rook e1. Okay, I can try b5, a kind of an intermediate move here. And then take. Oh, this. Okay, queen takes. I hope I don't miss anything. So c5 is vulnerable. And if I move the queen, it's probably queen c4. So I have to move the rook. Like rook c8. Queen e6. Okay, queen e6, queen e5. That was my plan. So I'm offering a queen exchange, and it seems I'm not blundering anything. But let's see. Not sure. Can get the bishop to the game.
To use this feature, please make sure your app is running and can access the
Well, bishop f8 is unlikely to work. Queen c6, c4. c4 is a possibility. So if I play this move, it's bishop f2, taking this pawn. If I play c4, it's still bishop f2. Play f5. Okay, so Akenga, unfortunately, I cannot challenge you. I will do a challenge once again, but it seems that you are not accepting challenges. I can try to chase the queen away with this move, so let me try this. Yeah, just a new challenge. Custom position order, 15 plus 10, fin. So I'm sending a challenge, but it shows that your challenge does not match the member's current match settings. So you have to adjust your match settings. So here, bishop f8, not bishop f6, because bishop f6, knight e4. Queen b7. Queen b7, I can successfully play rook d8 move. Well, knight e4 anyway. Fine. What about this move? This pawn is hanging. What else is coming? Knight f7, knight g5 check is coming. Yeah, it seems I have to play it. h4. Okay, fine. So king g8. Yeah, let's do king g8. I'm not defending e7, but I'm defending it with the queen, so it's not a big issue. We can also try like that. Okay, rook c7, so attacking my pawn. But this is a poison pawn, I think. You can also try something like that. No, it fails. So knight g5 is coming now. Okay, let me just defend against this move. Logical. So it's time to open the position. With a 5. Oh, well, the rook c5 is obviously a blunder. But maybe white can play e5 with the pawn. So what about this move, actually? Bishop takes e7. Takes e4. Yeah, I like this move. Taken on f5. Okay, fine. Well, if I take bishop f2, so that's why I have to check first and then play this. Okay, so here I take on e4. And then I take on f5. Check. Okay, but this is a check. I lose a pawn. Where do I move my queen? I can move my queen to f6 actually. Seven, queen eight. Uh-huh. So the game starts. Okay, let's start the game. Queen e7. Okay, so I'm losing a pawn. Which one to lose? I think rook f6 is maybe king d5 is a better move. a5, I lose on c6. Okay, rook f6 then. Okay, this move. Then queen a6, but maybe it's not a big issue. If I do queen f6, is it better? Probably yes. I miss a check on b3, but it's just a check. Rook a7. Right. So c5. I have some plan in mind. Okay, knight c3, c6. So here, well, queen b3, I'm planning to play queen f7 to offer another trade. Well, I don't fully understand the purpose of a4, so let me take on e5. a4. Okay, I didn't expect this move at all. Well, I need to take then. Queen c7. Mm-hmm. So in case of knight h4, it's probably rook e6, very nice tactics. But I think I can just take on g3 first. Yeah, I can take on g3, it's winning. King d5 is a must. Queen e5 is a must. So this is the most tough endgame, but I have better placement of my pieces. So now I attack the b pawn. How do you defend it? With rook a2, which seems to be very passive. So bishop e6 fails because of bishop g3. Okay, knight e7 just. Queen b3, logical. What do I expect? Castle, king side or queen side. Okay, let me just play this move. Not sure if it's a good idea, but why not? Okay, this. Okay, I can deliver a check, take the pawn with a check, and retreat back to b6. This is how I will be 2 pawns up. So the next move is rook b2 anyway. Oh, rook d1. Rook d1. What's the threat of rook d1? Okay, let's play b6 because I want to move my bishop. Here I take. Fine, and then I retreat back defending the pawn. And this is a winning position. Yeah, okay, fine. c4. I am 2 pawns up, so I can sacrifice one. Rook b3 is coming. g6 is still a weakness. This is what bothers me, but maybe it's not a big issue. I can. So king goes there. Here, and this is how I protect h8 rook. Well, yes, it's obviously losing because, well, after king takes, it's queen d6, and after queen takes, I don't know, but I'm a piece up, so probably still queen d6, f4, well, just bishop b2. Oh, bishop b2 is actually a blunder. Okay, not bishop b2, c4 first, and then bishop b2. Okay, thank you for the game. This h5. g5. So I have to play this move to not lose. Okay, rook c6, this is what I prepared. Now, once the rooks are exchanged, it's a completely winning position because of the extra pawn. So John uses help of his daughter. Well, okay, fine. Probably even Magnus Carlsen won't be able to help you here because it's obviously e4, king e5, king d4 then. Okay, this move. So for this move, I prepared bishop f4 originally. Let me see if I had anything else. I can sacrifice the queen, bishop a5, bishop d2. No. Let's play bishop f4. Yeah, but it's still losing. Okay, thank you for the game. I have one left. It's this, and then I'm going to show you what originally should happen. I mean, what happened originally in the game and how you should play instead. And I'm trying to connect the rooks if I can. Take. Okay, how to get the rooks connected? Bishop g4 is not the move that I would like to play here. If I play bishop a6, it's actually playable, but then rook d1 and I need to bring the queen back. I can also play this move, but what for? Rook d1. Maybe bishop a6, rook d1 and c4. Sacrificing the pawn back. So the knight isn't very well placed. Or I can try this move, but then it's likely to be f3, and this check is not promising. Okay, let me first... well, queen c7. Queen c7 is a possibility. But I believe the queen should be on e5. The e5 square is really good. Bishop, well, rook d1, then where does the bishop go? Or I can try with bishop d7 and bishop e8. It's still playable. No, bishop d7, rook d1, bishop e8, queen e6, attacking my pieces. Then I have queen e5. Probably it's the best option. Okay, queen if... well, which move? Bishop d7 first. I don't want to sacrifice the pawn too early because then my position is worse from a positional point of view. Here, at least I have a compensation of a pawn. Okay, g3. Well, queen e5. Maybe queen f3 also. Queen f3 is... queen f3, then bishop e6. Okay, let's do queen e5. So it's rook d1, and once I play this, it's f4, right? This is a pity. Yes, it's a pity. I don't like it anymore. Oh, this time actually I can play bishop g4. Yeah, this time bishop g4 looks better. Queen c7. With this move, I prevent the queen's invasion to e6. Oh, wait a second. Instead of the bishop, the queen. Okay. So this move. Well, let's exchange the rooks. This knight is not doing much, and well, this knight is also not doing anything. But well, if this knight, let's say, was somewhere on e3, I would experience more problems, or even on f4. Well, exchanging pieces actually helps me a lot because, well, then I avoid problems and maybe can convert my extra pawn. So bishop c8. Yes, but it's completely fine once you take. So I can take with my queen or the knight, so which allows me now to play king g7. And after that, I can take with my queen to not let the white queen to invade my camp. Taking with the knight is still playable, but then I cannot play queen d6. So let's take with the queen. Okay, let's just play some prophylaxis. Right now, maybe e5 is only a problem. I want to play c4, so I make this pawn weaker, but at the same time, I may get more space. Yeah, I should exchange the queens. If this is possible, then I'm clearly almost winning. My knight should be somewhere here. But the enemy knight shouldn't be on d5. So let's open the position. What do you think? e5, yeah, as expected. c5, what do you think? b5. No, it fails actually. So queen a6, queen c7. Yes, queen c7. Well, b5 maybe works, but b5, what's the purpose? Maybe a5 instead. c5. Okay, let's try this. Maybe it's actually a mistake. Oh, I also missed this move. It's a pity. Oh, queen a6 should be played, of course. Now I'm in trouble, right? There is not much I can do. Queen f7. So moving the knight. I have no square for the knight. No, this is already losing. So queen b7, for example, queen f7, king d8, queen f8, king c7, queen takes c7. How it was possible to play like that? So let's move the knight. I don't know what else. Well, it's also a blunder actually. But, so I just simply lose a queen. Okay, so you won. I blundered it, but I think my position was quite good before I played f5. So this position is completely fine. So here queen e6, queen c7, taking there, but then f5 should be fine with some. Queen e2 is not possible. I need to sacrifice one pawn, but it still should be fine. Okay, let's go back to the analysis. What did originally happen in the game? D takes e5, queen e7, knight c3. Well, he didn't play c6, but if let's say he plays c6, then queen b3 should be played, or bishop c4 can be played. Bishop c4, knight e5, knight takes e5, queen takes e5, and bishop g3, chasing the queen away. And in case of queen d4 or something like that, it's simply this. With rook d1 this time to be played with the tempo. So guys, what you missed is bishop g3 move. In the game, c6 wasn't played. Instead, it was knight e5, queen e5, and bishop g3 then. Queen e6, knight e5, and it's completely lost. So king f7, knight c7, queen e4, bishop e2. Taking means the queen is trapped. Bishop h3, well, yes, this is what, well, rook b8, saving doesn't work. Queen b3, and then if knight e6, it's simply knight takes knight and the rook hanging there. If the king moves to f8, well, then it's bishop d6, knight e7, castle, it's just a disaster. So queen e2, rook e1, and take on e7 with a checkmate. Bishop h3, knight e8, bishop g2, but it's not a big problem. And then white was able to realize their advantage. It was Bobby Fischer, actually. No, it was Alexander Kotov. Bobby Fischer is the other game that I prepared for today. Knight e6. So bishop g3 is the key move that you missed. Even when the pawn is on c6, it's still a promising idea. So for example, c6, bishop c4, knight e5, knight takes e5, queen takes e5, this, and you chase my queen to go back, and then this move becomes stronger. So knight goes to h6, probably then a4, or actually you can castle queenside right away. For b5, I think it's this, similar to Paul's Murphy game. And then bishop d6, that's it. Okay, fine, guys. You got your homework. Any questions, send it to tricksofchess@gmail.com. So we are done for today. See everyone next weekend. Next Sunday, there will be webinar. However, make sure to join the webinar in time. We start at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. If I'm not mistaken, next Sunday, Europe switches to winter time. So that's why for you, we are likely to start 1 hour earlier, if I'm not missing anything. So do not forget about it. I will send an email to remind you about that. As for these games, I'll try to add the analysis at Chessland's group on chess.com, so you're gonna see it anyway. Okay, perfect. See everyone on next Sunday. Bye-bye.